Hi everyone, my name is JD and I'm going to tell you today about an awesome new app we created called Kronos Timezoner. So first things first, Kronos Timezoner was created by myself, JD, and Dan in a project called Chingu, and it was created in the latest cohort called Chingu Voyage. And you can see our information there. I'll show it to you at the end as well, so in case you want to contact either of us. Anyway, what is Kronos Timezoner? Well, have you ever been in a situation where you're talking to a group of people or one person on Slack and you want to communicate a time, but that person or those people happen to be across the world, across the country, so you can't really figure out what time that means for them? Well, what Kronos Timezoner does is, in real-time messaging, it actually translates the time that you've written in your message into their time. So they will literally see the time that you wrote, and they will see the time that it means for them, as you can see right here now in the demonstration. And it's really just that simple. So, what tools did we use to create Kronos Timezoner? Well, first of all, I'll say that we programmed everything in JavaScript, so that was the only programming language that we used. We used Node, which is basically the runtime that's built on Chrome that most of us are pretty familiar with. We used Express, which is also a pretty popular framework that's used on top of Node. For a templating engine, we used Pug, which I had never used before, but is a pretty cool templating engine because it consolidates the type of code you have to write in terms of HTML, and on top of it, you can use JavaScript pretty easily and combine the two almost seamlessly compared to HTML and using script tags, etc. So if you haven't used that before, that's pretty cool. And then we used, for a CSS framework, we used Bulmo, which I had never used before, and it's based on Flexbox, and it's also pretty cool. If you haven't used that, cool to check out. So the big star, of course, is having used the Slack API, and especially the Events API, which was new to both of us, as I said, and cool once you got working. One of the gotchas sometimes, or two of the gotchas really, were the auth permission scopes, which you really just have to read the documentation and get that working for yourself, as well as the subscribing to events, the subscriptions. You have to subscribe to certain events to make things happen, and of course you just have to read the documentation and learn how to do that. So I guess before I do anything else, I should probably do a quick demonstration of Kronos Timezoner and give you an idea of what happens. So basically, first of all, you would go to kronostimezoner.herokuapp.com, and there you could click your Add to Slack button, and when you add to Slack, you basically can add it to your team. I think we've probably all done that before. So after you get your thank you message, you would go over to your app, and basically all you have to do is type in a time, including a message if you want, or not, and with that time you will be able to basically just see the time that you need. So for example, let's say I'm Dan and I live in the Pacific time, so I'm about 3 hours separate from New York, which is where I am now. So just for keep it short, if I were going to put in 5 p.m. here and click it over, you're going to look on JD and you're going to see that with JD, 5 p.m. for Dan means 8 p.m. because there's a 3-hour time difference. And that's really all it does. There are different formats that you can use for the time, and basically what we did was add a slash command, /Kronos, and if you want to know all the different formats that you can use, then you basically type that in, and here it'll give you a message, and you can see all the different formats for inputting time that will be translated for you. I think the next thing I should talk about is probably what was awesome about working on this project, as well as some of the things I learned. One of the things I previously mentioned is having used the Events API. I think before I had used the slash command and in the last cohort, and that was pretty neat to use, but getting this to work was even more rewarding, I guess I would say. Also, along with that, I thought that one of the coolest pieces of code, which was not created by me, to be honest, it was created by Dan, was interpreting the date. I don't know if you've used JavaScript before. anybody who has to use the date and convert date, it can be very difficult and be very tricky. But Dan found a way using the UTC method, which you could look up on MDN, and he used the UTC method to create the milliseconds, and obviously it creates the milliseconds since January 1st, 1970. You can read that for yourself, but he used that to convert the time. He took the full year, full month, full date, then the hour that we'd captured, the minutes that we'd captured, and he used the get time method divided by 1,000, and that gave us a number that we could use to give a projected time. Outside of that, he also collected the user's TZ offset, which is basically the user's time zone. So with the projected time and the time zone, that created another number in milliseconds that Slack could use correctly in order to create a Unix date, as they call it here, and translate the time in a way that would be good and that would be accurate. Finally, I think I should mention the things that I learned by working on this project and working in this cohort. One of the biggest things I learned is that communication and not just keeping things positive, but definitely being on a positive team is everything. It helps you stay creative, stay in it when things are hard, and there's nothing like being on a great team that really just, one encourages the other, etc. It's great. Another thing I learned is that when coding and all these algorithms that you practice over and over and over, trying to figure out ways of manipulating strings, etc., are very important when you're trying to solve problem in code. I never realized it more than I realized it during this particular project. Third of all, I think one of the big things that I learned about was workflow. I think workflow was key for the way things played out for us. We really used GitHub in a more professional manner. That is to say that I hadn't used it in this way before. I don't know if Dan had. He probably had, but I hadn't used GitHub in the way of outside of creating branches and doing a few merges, whereas in this particular project, we definitely branched off anytime we wanted to make changes so that we wouldn't ruin the master. On top of that, making our pull requests, dealing with merges and conflicts, which is something we all do, but we also used issues in a big way because especially working on a remote team, you can't always talk day to day, but if you're leaving notes and using issues to help with things, then you can still stay productive despite the fact you're not talking, not even face to face, but you're not talking directly day to day. So we used issues a lot in order to keep up with what was important to fix, what needed to be fixed quickly, etc. On top of that, I had never also created a production branch, and actually Dan did this. I forgot to mention earlier we used Heroku and MongoDB for this project as well, and what Dan did was create a production branch so that we'd have a development branch and a production branch, and the production branch was what got tied directly to Heroku, and basically what we did with that branch was, because there were two contributors, we used what was called a request to review. So basically, in order to merge to production, both people had to be in agreement. That is to say, once you did your pull request and your pull request said that you wanted to take the master and move it to production, the other contributor had to review the code, see that the code worked, give a message saying, yay, that worked, or no, this doesn't quite work, and if accepted, it would be merged to production. And that was something I had never done before, and it gave accountability to the whole project, not just to one person updating a project. So I thought that was pretty incredible as well. So as I said, I'd never used GitHub to that extent, and I'm glad I have and hope to use it more in this way in the future. So that's about it. I'll put up, I hope you guys will give Kronos Timezoner a try. It's still in development, so everything isn't perfect, but we're trying to improve it all the time. And if you have suggestions or anything, please feel free to reach out to us. Here's our information. As I said, reach out to us there. Reach out to us through kronostimezoner@gmail.com. Yes, Kronos Timezoner was misspelled in the beginning, so I have corrected that here, and this is the correct actually still not quite correct, but this is the correct place to find Kronos Timezoner. I think you can also still just use the HTTP. And I also want to reach out and say thanks to Chance McAllister. He's the one who created these cohorts, these Chingu cohorts, and you can go here and learn more about that. And it really is a great way to become a part of a community and that type of thing. So thanks very much for that, and I hope you'll check that out, and hope we'll be hearing from you soon.